The Nebula's Rest was one of the absolute busiest bars on Crossroads Station, a massive neutral trading hub floating in deep space where hundreds of different species from across the entire galaxy came regularly to drink, conduct business deals, and socialize with beings from other worlds. Tonight the bar was absolutely packed wall to wall with customers of every imaginable shape, size, and color you could think of. Large reptilian beings with scales and horns sat next to small furry creatures barely bigger than house cats. Insectoid species with multiple arms shared tables with blob-like aliens that communicated through color changes. The air was filled with dozens of different languages being spoken simultaneously, creating a constant buzz of incomprehensible noise punctuated by occasional laughter and the clinking of glasses. Jack Miller sat at a corner table that was slightly quieter than the rest of the crowded bar. He was with a group of alien colleagues that he worked with daily on the station's maintenance crew. They handled everything from fixing broken air recyclers to repairing damaged hull plating. It was hard, dangerous work, but it paid decently, and Jack had made some good friends despite the obvious differences between species. He was currently nursing a cold beer, the bottle already halfway empty. He was the only human sitting at this particular table, surrounded by 7 aliens from 4 completely different species. This was pretty normal for Jack. Humans were still relatively rare this far out from Earth territory. The conversation at the table had turned to the subject of humans and their bizarre behaviors, as it often seemed to do once everyone had a few drinks in them and their inhibitions lowered. "I still cannot believe what your species does for entertainment," said Torvik, shaking his large armored head in disbelief. Torvik was a KRYL, a species that looked like a cross between a dinosaur and a tank. He had thick reptilian skin covered in natural armor plating and stood nearly 7 feet tall even when sitting down. "Seriously, look at this video I found. Just look at it." Torvik pulled up a holographic video on his personal comm device and projected it into the air above the table where everyone could see it clearly. The 3-dimensional image showed a human back on Earth doing parkour through an urban environment. The person was running at full speed across rooftops, jumping fearlessly between buildings separated by gaps that would mean certain death if they missed, vaulting over obstacles with practiced grace, climbing walls that looked completely smooth, moving at speeds that seemed reckless and dangerous. "They do this for fun," Torvik continued, his voice absolutely full of disbelief and confusion. "No payment involved. No survival necessity. No logical reason whatsoever. Just for the thrill of it. For entertainment." The other aliens sitting around the table burst into loud laughter at this statement. Several of them shook their heads or made gestures equivalent to disbelief in their respective cultures. "Humans risk death for entertainment," wheezed Kessa, a small furry Quillex who looked like someone had crossed a cat with a raccoon and made it walk upright. She was barely 3 feet tall and covered in soft gray fur. "This is insane behavior. Their bones break so easily compared to most species, yet they jump off buildings and across gaps that would kill them if they make even one small mistake." She dissolved into high-pitched giggles that sounded almost like a dog's squeaky toy. "I saw a different human video last week where they rode down a mountain on a tiny board with wheels attached to it," added Vren, a tall insectoid manther with multiple arms and compound eyes that glittered in the bar's dim lighting. "They were going so incredibly fast that one single mistake would have killed them instantly. Would have sent them flying off the path to their deaths. And they were smiling the entire time. Actually enjoying themselves." More laughter erupted around the table. Even some aliens at nearby tables who overheard the conversation started chuckling and sharing their own stories about bizarre human behaviors they had witnessed. Jack just smiled slightly and took another slow drink of his beer. He was completely used to this kind of conversation by now. After 3 years working on Crossroads Station, he had sat through countless discussions where aliens found human behavior absolutely baffling and hilarious. They simply could not understand why humans did half the things they did. "Your species is genuinely insane," Torvik declared loudly, downing the rest of his drink in one gulp and slamming the empty glass on the table. "Absolutely insane. Clinically crazy. You are so fragile compared to most species. So easily broken. Your bodies have no natural armor or weapons. Yet you deliberately do the most dangerous things imaginable for absolutely no logical reason. It is because they are young and stupid as a species," Kessa said, still giggling into her drink. "They have not existed long enough to learn to properly value their own lives yet. Give them another few thousand years of evolution and they will calm down." "I heard humans even invented something called extreme sports," Vren added. "Activities specifically designed to be as dangerous as possible. They actually compete to see who can do the most reckless things and survive." "Why?" Torvik asked, genuinely baffled. "What is the evolutionary advantage? How did a species that takes such unnecessary risks survive long enough to reach space travel? Luck, Kessa suggested. Pure random luck. The entire table laughed again at this assessment of humanity's survival. Jack remained completely quiet through all of this, just listening and smiling faintly. He did not bother trying to explain or defend human behavior. Let them have their fun and their jokes. He had learned long ago that trying to make aliens understand the human need for excitement and challenge was basically impossible. They simply did not think the same way. Different species, different psychology, different values. That was just how the galaxy worked. He took another drink of his beer and let the conversation continue flowing around him, waiting to see where it would go next. As the night wore on and more drinks were consumed by everyone at the table, Torvik became noticeably louder and increasingly boastful about his accomplishments. The large HFY warrior started bragging extensively about various dangerous and impressive things he claimed to have done during his long life. I once climbed the legendary spires of Kral, Torvik announced proudly, his chest puffing out with pride. 3,000 meters of completely sheer rock face. Straight vertical cliff with almost no handholds. Only the strongest and most skilled HFY warriors ever succeed in that climb. Most who attempt it fall to their deaths within the first 100 meters. The other aliens around the table made appropriately impressed noises and gestures. Several of them asked questions about the climb and expressed admiration for such a difficult achievement. That is nothing compared to what I have done, Vren countered immediately, not wanting to be outdone. The insectoid leaned forward, his multiple arms gesturing dramatically. I survived the trial of blades on my homeworld. 48 continuous hours of non-stop combat against trained warriors. No breaks. No rest. No mercy. Only 10% of participants survive to pass the trial. The rest die with honor. Impressive, Torvik admitted grudgingly. But I also fought in the border wars against the Threenix Horde for 3 full years. They went back and forth like this for several minutes, each trying to top the other's story with increasingly dramatic tales of danger and bravery. The conversation became a competition to see who had done the most impressive feats. Then Torvik, who was definitely drunk by this point, pointed with one thick clawed finger across the bar toward the large viewing window that overlooked the station's central hub. Beyond the transparent material, a massive open space in the station's internal structure was clearly visible. See that gap over there? Torvik said, his words slightly slurred but still understandable. The gap between Section 7 and Section 9. 50 meters across open space. Instant death if you fall into the heavy machinery spinning below. Everyone at the table turned to look where he was pointing. They all knew what he was talking about. The gap was absolutely famous on Crossroads Station. It was a space between two major sections of the station that had never been properly connected during construction due to some long-forgotten design flaw or budget issue. The two platforms were separated by 50 meters of empty air. And far below, visible even from the bar's distance, you could see the dangerous spinning turbines and grinding gears of the station's massive power generation systems. Anyone who fell into that machinery would be instantly killed and their body torn to pieces. No species has ever successfully jumped across the gap, Torvik continued, his voice taking on a storytelling quality. It is completely impossible. The distance is simply too far for any biological being to jump, no matter how strong or fast. Many warriors from various species have tried over the years to prove their courage and strength. All of them have died. Their names are recorded on a memorial wall near Section 7. Why would anyone even try such a stupid thing? Kessa asked, her small furry face scrunched up in confusion. What is the point of attempting something impossible that will just get you killed? To prove they could do it, Torvik laughed, the sound rumbling deep in his armored chest. To show everyone watching that they are strong and brave and willing to risk everything. To achieve glory and have their name remembered forever. But it cannot be done. The gap cannot be crossed. Especially not by weak species. He turned his large head and looked directly at Jack when he said those last two words. Weak species. Humans especially could never make that jump, Torvik said with a wide grin that showed all his sharp teeth. Much too fragile. Much too weak. No natural strength or armor. They would fall and die just like all the others who tried. Probably would not even make it halfway across before gravity pulled them down into the machinery. The other aliens around the table laughed in agreement with this assessment. Several of them made jokes about humans being too soft and breakable for such a feat. Jack set down his beer very slowly and deliberately. The bottle made a soft sound as it contacted the table surface. He looked at Torvik for a long measuring moment. His expression was completely calm and unreadable. Then Jack stood up smoothly from his chair. "Hold my beer," Jack said simply, his voice quiet but clear. He handed his half-full bottle to the completely shocked Kessa, who took it automatically without thinking. Then Jack turned around and started walking calmly toward the bar's exit with steady, purposeful steps. "Wait, where are you going?" Kessa called after him, genuine confusion in her high-pitched voice. She was still holding his beer bottle, staring at it like she did not understand how it had gotten into her paws. "To the Gap," Jack replied without turning around or slowing his pace. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was announcing he was going to the bathroom. The entire table fell into complete and utter silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Torvik's eyes went wide. Vren's mandibles stopped moving mid-chew. Kessa just stood there frozen, holding the beer. Then everyone at the table scrambled to their feet at once and rushed after Jack, drinks forgotten. By the time the group of aliens managed to catch up with Jack, pushing their way through the crowded corridors of Crossroads Station, he was already standing calmly at the very edge of Section 7. His toes were literally inches from where the solid metal floor ended and the 50-meter drop began. He was looking across the massive gap at Section 9 on the opposite side, his expression calm and focused. A small crowd had already started to gather around the area. Word spread incredibly fast on a space station when something interesting or unusual was happening. People were pointing and whispering. Some were pulling out recording devices to capture whatever was about to happen. "Jack, this is complete madness," Kessa squeaked, her small furry body practically climbing up his leg as she pulled desperately at his arm with both paws. "You will die. The gap absolutely cannot be crossed. It is physically impossible. Many warriors have tried this exact same jump over the years," Vren added with genuine urgency in his clicking voice. His compound eyes were wide with fear. "All of them failed. Every single one. Turn back right now before you kill yourself in front of everyone." Jack completely ignored both of them. His attention was entirely focused on examining the gap with intense concentration. He was looking carefully at the exact distance between the two platforms, calculating angles and trajectories in his head using math and physics he had learned back on Earth, measuring out his approach path with his eyes, analyzing the wind currents moving through the open space. The aliens standing around him realized with slowly growing horror that he was not joking around. He was not trying to scare them or make a point. He was actually genuinely serious about attempting this impossible jump. "You will die," Torvik shouted loudly, all his earlier mockery and joking completely gone from his voice. Now there was only real fear and concern. "I did not mean you should actually try this. I was just making jokes. Just talking. I did not think you would be crazy enough to attempt it." Jack looked back over his shoulder at them and smiled that same calm, confident smile he had worn all evening in the bar. "I have done worse stunts for a YouTube video back home," he said in a completely matter-of-fact tone, like this was the most normal thing in the world. The aliens standing around him had absolutely no idea what a YouTube was. The reference meant nothing to them. But they clearly understood his tone of voice and body language. He was completely serious. This was really happening. Jack calmly took off his jacket and handed it to Kessa, who clutched it against her small furry chest with trembling paws. Her eyes were huge with fear and disbelief. Then Jack began stretching methodically. He stretched his arms above his head, pulling each one across his chest. He stretched his legs, pulling each knee up toward his chest and holding it. He bent down and touched his toes, loosening his hamstrings. He rolled his shoulders in slow circles, working out any stiffness. He rotated his neck from side to side. He took several long, deep breaths, filling his lungs with oxygen and exhaling slowly to calm his heart rate. The crowd watching had grown significantly by this point. Over 100 different beings from dozens of species now surrounded the area, all watching in stunned silence. Some were recording. Some were making bets. Some were simply frozen in shock. Station security was pushing urgently through the gathered crowd, trying desperately to reach the front before something terrible happened. Their voices could be heard shouting for people to move aside and let them through. "Last chance to back out of this," Vren said desperately, his voice almost pleading. "Please, Jack. This is not worth dying over. You have nothing to prove to us." Jack did not respond to the plea. He was backing up now, giving himself proper running room for the approach, taking careful steps backward while keeping his eyes locked on the opposite edge 50 meters away. His expression was intensely focused. All the casual humor from the bar was completely gone now. This was serious. This was life or death. The massive crowd that had gathered fell into complete and utter silence. You could not hear a single voice. Not a single movement. Everyone was holding their breath in anticipation of what was about to happen. Some beings in the crowd were praying to various gods. Some had their eyes covered, unable to watch. Some had their recording devices aimed and ready. Jack stopped backing up. He had given himself about 20 meters of running space. He rolled his shoulders one final time, shook out his hands, took one last deep breath. Then his expression changed. His eyes narrowed with determination and focus. The crowd watched in absolute silence as the human prepared to attempt the impossible. The crowd erupted, but not immediately with cheers. First there was just shocked, stunned silence that lasted several long seconds, as if everyone's brain needed time to process what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly the noise began building. Started with gasps, small exclamations, whispers in a dozen different languages. Did that just happen? He made it. Impossible. The human crossed the gap. The whispers grew louder, turned into shouts, exclamations of disbelief in languages Jack could not understand. Some beings were jumping up and down. Some were embracing each other. Some just stood frozen in shock. Security finally reached the front of the crowd, but there was nothing left to stop. The deed was done. Jack calmly dusted himself off, brushing metal debris from his clothes. His hands were scraped and bleeding slightly. His ribs ached from the impact, but he was alive and standing. Then he walked casually to the nearby maintenance bridge that safely connected Section 7 and Section 9. The bridge that normal, sensible people used to cross between the sections. He strolled across it like nothing unusual had happened. He came back to where his completely stunned colleagues were still standing, frozen in shock. Their faces showed expressions of absolute disbelief. Kessa was still clutching his jacket. Her small mouth hung open. She looked like she might faint. Torvik's armored jaw had literally dropped. His eyes were wider than anyone had ever seen them. Vren was making a continuous clicking sound, his species equivalent of shocked stammering. Jack walked up to them calmly, like he had just returned from a bathroom break. Jack walked calmly back across the bridge to where Kessa still stood completely frozen like a statue, holding his beer bottle in her small trembling paws. Her tiny furry face was locked in an expression of pure shock, her eyes wider than anyone had ever seen them. She looked like her brain had completely stopped working. Jack gently took the beer bottle from her shaking grip. Her paws were trembling so badly she almost dropped it when he touched it. He raised the bottle to his lips and took a long, slow drink of the now warm beer like nothing unusual had just happened. Like he had just returned from a quick errand instead of cheating death by inches. Anyone else think humans are too fragile? Jack asked casually, looking around at the massive silent crowd surrounding him. Nobody spoke. Not a single voice. Nobody even moved. Over 100 beings from dozens of different species just stood there staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to awe to complete disbelief. Then Torvik, the massive KRYL warrior who had started this entire crazy situation with his mocking jokes in the bar, did something that Jack absolutely never expected to see. He bowed. Actually physically bowed his huge armored head in a gesture of deep respect. For a proud warrior species like the KRYL, bowing to anyone was incredibly significant. It meant acknowledging someone as your superior. I was completely wrong about your species, Torvik said quietly, his normally booming voice subdued and sincere. Totally and completely wrong about everything. You are not weak. You are not fragile. You are the craziest, bravest, most incredible species I have ever encountered in my entire life. The moment Torvik bowed, it was like a dam breaking. The crowd erupted into absolutely deafening cheers and shouts. Beings from a dozen different species rushed forward all at once to congratulate Jack. To touch him. To shake his hand or whatever appendage their species used for greetings. To simply be physically near the human who had just accomplished the impossible. Kessa was crying tears of relief and joy, her small body shaking with emotion. Vren was clicking his mandibles in the Manther expression of extreme respect. Other aliens were shouting Jack's name. Some were already recording messages to send to their homeworlds about what they had witnessed. Station security gave up trying to control the situation and just let it happen. What were they going to do? Arrest the guy for successfully jumping a gap? Charge him with being too brave? Within just a few hours, the story had spread across the entirety of Crossroads Station like wildfire. Everyone who lived or worked on the station had heard about the human who jumped the gap. The impossible feat that no species had ever accomplished. Some people believed it immediately. Others insisted it had to be an exaggeration or a lie until they saw the recorded videos that dozens of beings had captured. By the next day, the story had reached ships that were departing Crossroads Station and traveling to distant star systems across the galaxy. Traders and merchants carried the tale with them to hundreds of different worlds. Pilots shared it over long-range communication channels. Within one standard week, every corner of the known galaxy had heard the story. The human who jumped the gap. The fragile species that everyone had dismissed as weak, doing something that the strongest warriors from the most powerful species had all failed to achieve. Jack became something of a living legend practically overnight. Not just on Crossroads Station but throughout galactic society. He was the human who had definitively proved that his species' so-called crazy stunts were not stupidity or recklessness or youthful ignorance. They did those things because they actually could. Because humans possessed abilities and determination that other species simply did not understand. 3 days after the famous jump, Jack was back at the Nebula's Rest Bar sitting at the same corner table with the same group of alien colleagues. But everything was completely different now. They were treating him like absolute royalty. Like some kind of celebrity or hero. Other patrons kept sending drinks to his table. People were constantly coming up to ask for his autograph or to take pictures with him. Torvik and the others hung on his every word with rapt attention. "So that jump across the gap," Kessa said eagerly, leaning forward with bright interested eyes. "That was definitely the craziest, most dangerous thing you have ever done in your entire life, right?" Jack thought about the question for a moment, taking a casual drink from his beer. His expression was thoughtful. "Nah," he said finally, completely casually. "Not even close to the craziest thing. Same basic situation happened when I did a backflip off a roof at my cousin's wedding back on Earth. Beer, boredom, and bad decisions." The entire table went completely silent. Every alien just stared at him with their mouths hanging open. "What?" Torvik practically shouted, his voice full of shock and horror. "You jumped off a roof at a wedding? A family celebration?" "Well, technically it was a backflip," Jack clarified with a small grin. "And there was a pool below, so it was not that dangerous really. Hit the water perfectly. Did not even spill my drink." He demonstrated by raising his current beer bottle and keeping it level. The aliens sitting around the table looked at each other with wide eyes. Then back at Jack. Then at each other again. Their expressions showed they were mentally recalculating everything they thought they knew about humans. They had thought humans were crazy before this week. Had laughed at the videos of humans doing parkour and extreme sports. Had mocked their reckless behavior. Now they realized with slowly dawning horror that they had not understood even half of it. Had not grasped the true extent of human willingness to do absolutely insane things. Somewhere in the galaxy over the following weeks and months, a new saying started spreading among the various intelligent species. It got passed from trader to merchant to pilot. Became common knowledge. If a human ever says the words, "hold my beer," you should immediately step back and just watch what happens next. Because you are about to witness one of two things. Either something absolutely amazing that will blow your mind, or the single dumbest thing in the entire universe. Sometimes you will see both at once. Jack raised his beer bottle in a toast when he heard that saying for the first time. He thought it was pretty accurate.